ready.
Welcome to another episode of Buff in the Rough. Today we'll hear from Jason Unzicker about ordering a Beagle off of Craigslist, the origin story of Rocky Run Beagles, having his hunt disrupted by a house cat, and a lot more. Help me welcome Jason to the program. Well, hey Jason, how are you doing?
Doing good, Sam. Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast here. I do see it posted. I follow UKC Beagles Afield on Facebook, and I see it posted there and listen to it when I can. So, yeah, it's just an honor to be here with you.
Well, I appreciate it. We're really happy to have you on. I've never interviewed anyone from Iowa, so I'm really excited to learn more about your part of the country and kind of what hunting looks like out there. But before we get started, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into rabbit hunting?
Yeah, boy, my story is kind of a little different than normal. You know, usually you have a story where Grandpa introduced me to coon hounds, or I had a friend or a dad or something like that, or just hounds in general, and that's not my story. I grew up in a hunting family. I hunted with Dad, but we never had any dogs to hunt with, and certainly not any hounds. And we hunted deer and small game, squirrel, pheasant, and when we would go out and pheasant hunt, my dad liked to do that. I'd get more excited about jumping a rabbit and trying to shoot a rabbit than I would about the pheasants. And it's probably because I was a better shot on the ground than I was in the air. My son's different. You know, my son, he shot trap in high school and in college, and he does real well with those clay birds and stuff. But I give him a hard time on the rabbits. I used to tease him when he was a kid that it takes him 3.5 shots to kill a rabbit and take it down. But anyway, you know, so I didn't start off with any introduction to hounds or anything. I just remember being a kid, enjoying jumping those rabbits and getting excited about that. And I thought to myself, all I knew was that you hunt rabbits with beagles. And so I thought to myself, when I get older and become an adult, if I get the opportunity, I'm going to try to get a beagle and start hunting. So, you know, fast forward through high school, graduated, you know, got married, 7 years of Bible school, and got my first church and settled in the community here in the Burlington area, Burlington, Iowa. And I said, okay, I got an opportunity now where I could care for a dog and have time to train and things. And so went ahead and just purchased a dog off of Craigslist, you know, no papers, and knew nothing about this dog, nothing, and didn't know anything about hunting with her, beagle, nothing. And it was my only dog, so I soloed her, and I thought she was great because I'd never seen anything else, you know. And she did well, and just soloing, and she was slow, but she did well. She actually retrieved for me, too, so I was happy about that. And so I got to the point where I thought, well, you know, probably want to look into trial, and I can't remember how I just stumbled across it somewhere, but I found a club just a couple hours away that did hunting beagle in UKC, and so I figured that this dog wasn't up for it and wasn't registered anyway, and so I just went and watched them run a couple times, and I was really impressed to see dogs do things I didn't see dogs do before with my dog. And went a couple times and watched and really enjoyed it, and my eye was really drawn to a dog named Bojangles. Dan Ryan owned that dog, and he was the dog in UKC Hunting Beagle in Iowa at the time. And so I told Dan, I said, well, you ever get a chance to breed to a good female? And he's a breeder. His wife, I think, does terriers or something like that, too, as far as breeding. And I said, you ever get a chance to breed with a good female in your kennel, you know, let me know. I'd like to be on the list. So he put me on the list. He bred to a female that came out of Dave Tipton's Top Notch line, which is down southern Missouri. And she only had one female, and I wanted a female, and I was first on the list. So this is the dog I got. I'll tell you what, Sam, I was just blessed. I mean, this dog, for just getting your first dog and not knowing anything about it, and training her, and, you know, I braced her with my older dog at that point, you know, and she was just a really smooth, clean hound, and really enjoyed her. Started trialing with her in UKC. After she turned about one, she got a couple wins, ended up becoming a champion, and then I saw the UKC Performance Pack was starting to grow just across the river in western Illinois. And so I called those guys over there. They said, yeah, come on over. And so I took Ilsa to that first hunt, and she got first place in the registered class. And 2 weeks later, I took her to another hunt at a different club over there. She got first place. And 2 weeks later, I took her to the Nationals there, which was in Root House, Illinois. And I don't know, 70-some registered dogs. She took fifth, and that was just her format. She was just a clean, smooth check dog, And she ended up granding in that format pretty quickly. And then I took her back to hunting Beagle, and she eventually finished in that too. So just a solid dog, if you want to have a foundation for your kennel. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better, just being clean and no faults, anything like that. I mean, she wouldn't necessarily wow you on anything really in particular, just real smooth and clean. And I probably bred her 4 or 5, maybe 6 times. And she's really the foundation of my kennel that way. I remember I started her, I gave her the name Unzicker's Ilsa, I looked and I said, I got to name this dog if I'm going to register, and run her in the trials. And they use their last name, right? Or back then a lot of people did. And so then they draw her out on casts and nobody could pronounce my last name, I said, we got to ditch that, And about that time I had bought a farm in western Illinois for my dad and I to hunt. And there was a little creek runs through it called Rocky Run Creek. And so I named my kennel Rocky Run Beagles, and that's how the Rocky Run name came about. But so that's a little bit how I got introduced to it. Kind of a different story there. Like I said, I've been married 28 years now, and I got 2 kids, and they're leaving the house here, just empty nest for the first time. And I'm amazed how much free time I got now. I never knew how busy I was when the kids were at home. So
well, that's all great information. Let's unpack it a little bit. 7 years of Bible school. What is that? Is that up to master's level kind of stuff? I mean, what is that? That's a lot of school.
Yeah, that was master's level. So it's your 4 years just to get your bachelor's degree. My bachelor's degree was in biblical studies from Trinity International University in Deerfield, Illinois, and then I went on into seminary, and that was in Denver Seminary. And got a Master's of Arts in Counseling, so that was just a 2-year program. And I'm also a licensed professional counselor. And actually, so then I got involved in ministry after that, and then I actually did a PhD program in theology. I wanted to get some more theology that I missed because I was doing the counseling in my master's program. And so I went back and did a PhD in theology too, but I did that while I was working ministry, so that wasn't as bad. But yeah, I was grateful to have a great wife. I got married when I was 20. She was 19, and she worked whatever cruddy job she could work all those 7 years to help pay bills as I worked full-time and went to school full-time. And she hasn't worked since. I threw her a graduation party or retirement party when I graduated. So enjoyed having been able to stay home with the kids all these years. So
that's a terrific story. I imagine that counseling comes in handy on some of these hunts that you go on.
Oh, yeah. I always tell people when I pick judges at my club, I said, I want people to know the rules, of course, but more important than that, I want a guy that's got the skills to be able to defuse a tense situation, right? Yeah, so.
That's terrific. Well, tell us a little bit about pheasant hunting. I don't know much about it, but we just don't have a lot of birds where I live. Every year we have like a dove season, and generally speaking, that's one weekend. But we just don't have a big bird population right here where we live. But I've heard all kinds of tales about how fun and exciting pheasant hunting can be. So could you describe what a pheasant hunt looks like, how you do it?
Yeah, we're here in southeast Iowa, and so we don't have a large population of pheasants. But as you go further west, you get closer to North or to South Dakota and Nebraska, you get really good populations. And, a lot of people like to hunt there where they use either a lab or a pointer of some sort, and they'll get a dog that'll point for them or then flush for them or something like that. So a lot of people use sporting dogs with that, and that's fun to go with those dogs too and hunting that way. I don't do a lot of it here. In fact, around here, about 5-6 years ago, a lot of guys sold their bird dogs just because the pheasant population was so low, and it wasn't worth hunting down here anymore, pheasants. But yeah.
Well, Jason, as you got started in this rabbit world and going down this rabbit hunting trail, who have been some of your biggest influences?
Yeah, I tell you what, that's a tough question because like I said, I didn't have that one mentor growing up and those things, and I kind of got into it just on my own. But probably the biggest influences I've had going along the way has been the judges that I've worked with and kind of apprenticed under. Just seeing how the hound sense they have and what they're looking for. You go to a cast when you're not judging, or at least now when I'm not judging, I sit back and enjoy not judging, and just watching the dogs. But when you're judging, you're constantly thinking and evaluating these dogs and looking for certain things. And so we're just talking to those judges, apprenticing under them and learning what you're looking for. Because, I probably only had 7 or 8 dogs that I ran seriously over these last 15 or whatever years it's been. And just getting to see other dogs and guys that have owned other dogs and what they're looking for has been really influential to me.
Could you describe the hunting conditions, what they're like in Iowa, and maybe tell us what kind of dog it takes to be successful where you are?
Yeah, that's a good question. Over here in Iowa, in our part of the country, we have a lot of corn and soybean fields. And so a lot of the rabbits are going to be just on the edge of the field and the timber, especially if you're in a finger with a thick draw or something like that. The rabbits aren't going to stage up in the big timber where there's no underbrush. If you get them jumped in the thick stuff, they'll run out in the big timber, and that's when the running's fun, But they're going to be in the thick brush and along the edges of the field, or if you got young timber and young brush where they need protection from above. The hawk population over the last 10 years has been soaring over here, so they need protection from above, and then they need the thick thorny stuff, multi-floral rows to protect them against the coyotes. When I grew up in this area in the Midwest, there wasn't a lot of coyotes around, and you could walk just a fence row, 2 foot of brush along a fence, and jump a rabbit out of there. You'd never find a rabbit sitting in a fence row, ways away from timber and thick brush now. They get killed by coyotes. In fact, this time of year, and by the time you get to February, all the rabbits that don't know how to use a brush pile, they're dead by now.
That's the truth.
But so that's kind of the terrain we got, and we got pockets of good population, but not as much as southern Missouri and some other places in the nation. So really what you need for your dogs, you want a dog that hunts hard. You might go, even in a trial sometimes, you might go 20, 30 minutes before you jump your first rabbit. You need a dog that's willing to hunt that long and that hard and not come back and sit at your feet and say, okay, let's go somewhere else, You need to hunt hard. Then the second thing is you need an honest mouth. Because the populations aren't super high in this area, you don't want a dog to bark on a cold track because they may not be able to get it up in the 3 minutes that's required before they take a minus. Right. Now, some other parts of the country, your mouthy dogs, mouthier dogs, they do okay because, you open up and, there's a lot of places in the country when you cut the dogs loose at a trial, it'd be unusual for them not to get a rabbit up in 3 minutes, Mm-hmm. So, but here that's not the case. So you got to have an honest mouth and you got to have a really good hunt.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your Craigslist dog and Ilsa and as being some of maybe your first hounds, and sounds like they're some of your favorite hounds. But could you talk about some of those favorite hounds that you've personally hunted over the years?
Yeah, boy, other than Ilsa, I probably think of 2 other hounds that I've owned. The first one there would be a dog I called Blaze, Rocky Run Blaze of Glory. He was out of Ilsa's first litter. And what was so special about him was he was one of those unique dogs that had, a really big nose, could smell well, but he also had a hot nose. A lot of dogs that can smell really well, have big nose, have a cold nose and they open too soon and will take a minus, or if you're hunting, they'll open up and you stand around forever wondering if they're going to get it going. And but he had that nose that could smell really well, but also had kind of that tight mouth, and for me, that's the great white buffalo that you're looking for, when it comes to beagles. And so I really enjoyed him, and he did really well that first year. I trialed him as a junior in UKC Hunting Beagle. He won the Junior West Division in the All-Star Series, which means he had more cast wins than any other junior dogs in that region. In fact, he had more cast wins than the other juniors in the nation. So I was pretty excited about him and getting ready for nationals that spring. That was back in 2020 at the height of the COVID shutdown. And normally we have nationals in April, but because of the shutdown, they pushed it back to September. and he ended up getting into some kind of a poison or something and died in
Oh
June.
no, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, 2 weeks after he turned 2 years old. So that was real sad, but I just felt like the Lord was convicting me to really focus in on the time we had together. He was already a grand champion. I had a good year and a half to run him, and well, I guess probably just a year to run him, and so focus on the good time we had instead of what we didn't have, and the Lord blessed me not too soon after that with Copper. He's a dog I got now. He's 4.5 years old. I just retired him actually at the end of last year because he made UKC Hall of Fame. But he's an interesting story. He's a dog that reminds you never give up too early on your hounds. In this particular litter, normally how I do my breeding program is if I want to keep a male out of this particular litter, I'll sell all the females at 8 weeks old. I'll start all the males. And then at 1 year of age, I'll pick the male I think's the best, and I'll sell the others as started, pups. And so I'm in that process with the males. I got 3 males I'm looking at, and I was really looking at this one male that seemed like he was doing really well in the snow and ice. It's Iowa, it's February, it's cold and icy, and he was doing really well. And my Copper dog, boy, he'd come back at my feet, and he wouldn't stay with the other dogs when they're running. And I thought, what in the world's going on with this guy? 7.5 months old, and just really struggling that way. And well, anyway, it was February 28th, the last day of rabbit season in Iowa that year, and I just caught all the other dogs. It's starting to get a little dark, and caught all the other dogs, got him in the dog box, and I said, "Where's Copper?" And I heard him strike in on a rabbit all by himself, and he soloed that rabbit 200 yards faster than I'd ever seen any of my dogs take a rabbit.
There you go.
Well, I better take a closer look at him, right? So I had 2 more weeks until nesting season. In nesting season, you can't run on public ground in Iowa. So I soloed him hard there for 2 weeks, and he really impressed me how fast he could move a rabbit. Ironically, over that time, the snow and ice melted, and my other dog that I was looking at, I found out that dog's going to be way too slow to trial when there's no snow on the ground. So I ended up giving him to my nephew. So I ended up keeping Copper, and boy, what a blessing he was. I started trialing him then, and in his rookie season, he had about half a year of trialing, and looking back, he won exactly 2/3 of his casts, and UKC Hunting Beagle just came out with their Hall of Fame titles. They changed their title system. It used to be once you grand championed a dog, that was the highest you can go, and they changed it where now you have 5 degrees of grand and then a Hall of Fame after that. And so I was looking at the numbers, and I thought, if he consistently wins 2/3 of his casts, and if I get to this many hunts, in Iowa and down in southern Missouri and some other places, he might have a chance to Hall of Fame. And so that was my goal with him, and thought he'd either make it or he wouldn't. And we just trialed, and I did some traveling. We went to, Indiana a couple of times, and Michigan once, and southern Missouri a bunch of times, more times than I care to think. That 6-hour drive, boy. But anyway, he ended up finishing at the end of last year. He had, ironically, ended up winning 51 out of 80 some casts. I can't remember the exact, but it was exactly 66% is how he finished. And so I retired him. I'll still run him at the state hunt coming up here, Iowa State Hunt, but I'm going to run other dogs at the regular club hunts and stuff. But he's been a big blessing and a joy to run. So those would be my top 3 dogs that I've owned that I really liked, Ilsa and Blaze and Copper.
And just so everybody knows, make sure I don't miss any of this. He's grand champion, grand hunting beagle champion, Hall of Fame, Rocky Run Copper Top.
Yep. He's so grand champion means he's grand champion on the bench. Then he's grand hunting beagle champion, Hall of Fame. So once you become, how the degrees work in the hunting beagle for UKC, the registered dog wins 5 times, he becomes a champion. He wins 8 times, he becomes a grand champion. He wins 8 more times, he becomes Grand 2. 8 more, Grand 3. All the way through Grand 5, and then he becomes Hall of Fame after that.
That's pretty impressive, my friend. That's probably a pretty short list of Hall of Fame hounds. But out front is that grand champion that stands by itself, which means he must be a pretty joker too. He must be a good-looking rascal. So it sounds like he's got it all.
Yeah, I've been blessed.
That's fantastic. Now I swear, I was doing a little homework on you, and I saw that Iowa has a Hound of the Year competition. and he's
Yeah.
won that at least once. I mean, when I was looking around, he may have won it more than once. But how does that work in Iowa? How do you guys run that state competition like that?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, just trying to get some more interest. Our clubs were growing. We're starting to bring some more money in. We said, let's do something to get some guys excited, give them some more competition other than just titles for their dogs. And so we started a Hound of the Year. And so basically, you don't have to be a resident of Iowa, but we're counting every cast win in Iowa that your dog gets goes towards Hound of the Year. And so the dog with the most cast wins in Iowa at the end of the year becomes the Hound of the Year. And then the opposite sex of that dog that has the most cast wins from that sex becomes opposite sex Hound of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
And Copper's won it those first 3 years. He pulled out a tight one last year. And so ready to retire him and then let some of the dogs come on and do well. We got a new young dog coming in with a new guy. Him and his son have been coming this year, and he's got a good dog named Falcon, and he's in the lead right now this year, and he's been getting some good wins.
Well, I'll tell you, if I lived in Iowa, I'd be happy to hear that Copper retired. So at least I might have a
to be honest
chance.
with you, there were some other guys that were counting his magic number to Hall of Fame before I started counting down those numbers. So.
Well, it sounds like you've done a ton of competition hunting with that hound. What are some of the better hounds you've hunted against over the years that really caught your eye when you were out with them?
Yeah, I tell you what, there's some really good hounds over in Performance Pack when I was running Ilsa. I got to see a little bit different style of dog and really enjoy that style, and then been doing more of the hunting beagle more recently after the Performance Pack program kind of died out. But there's one particular dog I want to share with you that's not local to Iowa, but northern Missouri. And he was real fun to run against because he was probably one of the best jump dogs I'd ever seen. His name was Gnawin' My Bones Blue, owned by Brad and Brittany Neff. And that particular dog was an amazing strike dog. And the reason why I liked running against him, and it was always a great competition when he and Copper would run against each other, was because Copper was a line dog. He would get a lot of first lines. He was that fast on the drive, and he was tighter mouth, so he didn't get a lot of first strikes. And it's not that Blue couldn't do well on the lines either. He could, but he just really shined on the strikes. So if we drew out together, we'd look, at each other and we'd say, well, it's all going to come down to, are we going to get more strikes or are we going to get more lines on this cast? And that's how it always came out. If we had more strikes, Blue ended up winning. If we had more lines, Copper ended up winning. And so it was always fun competing against Blue. Unfortunately, Blue died this last year too, a younger dog, and had an injury and ended up dying from that. But he was a real good dog to compete against. Enjoyed that.
Well, if you could come up with a dream cast of 4 dogs, and these could be past or present, dogs living today, dogs that have been gone for years and years and years, but maybe even dogs you hadn't hunted with, maybe just famous dogs, I don't know. But if you could come up with a dream cast of 4 dogs that you'd like to see go at it, I mean, who are some of those dogs?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. I've seen so many different really good dogs in different formats, not just the UKC Hunting Beagle and Performance Pack, but in ARHA, I did a little bit in ARHA too. I also ended up becoming a rabbit champion in both Progressive Pack and Little Pack of ARHA, so I got to get to see those guys and that style of hounds too. But if I were going to, pick a dream pack, I think I'd just say Blaze and Copper, my 2 dogs. I wish I could see them run against each other. I'd like to see how they would stand up to each other. So I think I would pick those 2 if I could. And then I'd probably go over to my old UKC Performance Pack days and maybe pick a dog that actually my Blaze dog was out of Eric Waddle's Crank dog. He was world champion in Performance Pack and just a real clean and solid hound. And another dog I really enjoyed watching and judging was in Performance Pack over there in Western Illinois was Ricky Gown's One-Eyed Jack's dog. That was a really good dog too. He won the Nationals several times in that format and won a lot of state hunts and all over the nation. And he was just a couple hours away from me, so I got to see him run and judge him quite a bit. And so, yeah, those would probably be 4 dogs that stick out in my mind that I just like to see go against each other and just watch them go.
So we've got Crank and Blaze and Copper and One-Eyed Jack. Who wins that cast?
Yeah, I don't know. uh, Copper and Blaze might get picked up, and if it was a performance pack judge for overrunning lines, they're more speed and drive. But I don't know. Crank in his heyday, he was tough to beat. I'll tell you what, he was definitely tough to beat.
Mm-hmm. If you were gonna have somebody handle your dog, if you could choose a handler to handle your dog in a high stakes hunt, who are you gonna call to see if they'll handle your dog?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's probably one I should be thinking about because I don't have any kennel partners. And there hasn't been a lot of occasions where I needed an extra handler, but it has happened several times. First time I remember was, about 3 years ago, the last time we had the Eliminator in Dixon, Missouri, the Eliminator West. And I didn't take vacation. I didn't expect to do any good. But I ran Copper, and he got a couple cast wins, and so he advanced on to Sunday, and I needed to get back for church. I didn't take any time off and was preaching and everything. And so I left Copper with Jeremy Breckenridge. And Copper's actually out of a dog that Jeremy once owned. And Jeremy's local here in Iowa. And so he ran Copper for me in the final and did really well handling him. I mean, he knows that style of dog. And from what he told me, Copper ended up third that year. We had a bad split. He got on the wrong end of a split in that championship cast, and that's kind of what hurt him. But Jeremy did a great job handling him at the Eliminator there. And I'll tell you, one other time I had somebody handle for me was Tammy Mosley, and that was just this last fall at the World Hunt. For that, I did take vacation for. I was prepared to stay all weekend, and I did stay all weekend. But both Copper and my Shy dog ended up getting first-round wins. So I ran Copper in the second round, and I needed somebody to handle my female Shy for me in the second round. And Tammy Mosley did, and she's really good with dogs. I mean, she knows how to calm a dog down and handle a dog right, and she did a great job. And so I appreciate those two. Those were really the only two times I can remember somebody handling for me, but would never have qualms about calling either of those two again and asking to handle for me.
Very good. Jason, talk us through maybe some of your most memorable hunting experiences. Are there any hunts that really stick out to you that just really are sharp and fresh, just like they happened yesterday?
Yeah, ironically, probably the ones that I remember the most were the ones that were, longer back in time. And that's because I was running a lot with my son back then when he was younger, 10, 12, somewhere in that age group. That's when I was running Ilsa in the performance pack, UKC performance pack. And he would run it. And that's a great format for youth, too, because they don't have to strike their dog. They just hang back in the gallery. The only time they handle the dog is if the judge asks them to get their dog and bring them up here or whatever, or time out, handle your dogs. So it's great even for really young kids. They can just handle, and the judges run with the dogs, and they do all the scoring. And as opposed to, hunting beagle in UKC where you strike your dog, you call lines, and you have that kind of interaction. But I remember at the Nationals, where I told you that Ilsa ended up getting fifth. I think it was the semifinals, and Ilsa was winning a lot, and so Ethan had his hopes really high, for Ilsa doing well in the Nationals, and so I think it was either second round or semifinals or whatever, and we were running this old railroad track, just some brush on both sides of the railroad track, and we're standing back in the gallery, a couple hundred yards, so we can't see that well, and what we could see was, Ilsa was middle to the end of that pack, and every time they were driving the rabbit hard right down that edge of that field with the brush, you could see she was not really the one driving and all that. And I remember Ethan would grumble to me, as a young kid, and just say, she's doing terrible, Dad. Oh, I'm so frustrated. She's doing terrible, right? And I said, yeah, I thought she was doing terrible too, from what I could see, And then at one particular point, the dogs got separated, and the judge called for Ethan, to handle his dog and bring him up and put him in with the rest of the pack, And he was just a little discouraged and didn't want to work hard and didn't want to do it. Oh, she's losing anyway. She's going to lose anyway. And I remember I got on him hard and I said, you need to get her. You need to give her every chance. You'll feel bad if she's actually got a chance here. You need to make sure you leave it in her hands. So he got on it, and he ended up go get in there, and he put her in with the rest of the pack. And I remember we're walking back with the dogs on the lead, walking back to the truck, and he's kind of grumbling to me again. She didn't do very well at all. She did terrible. We get back to the truck, and the judge runs the scores off, and lo and behold, she ended up winning the cast. And we asked the judge what happened, and he said, well, yeah, there's not much scoring when they're driving it straight down, all slotted up, straight down the edge of the field. But when they'd overrun it, Ilsa was the one that always picked up the turn and kept the race going, and she got the points for it, and that's how she ended up winning. So that's what I remember, never give up on your dog. You always work hard, but I remember that hunt because, to me, the most memorable hunts are the things that, my son got to learn about life, about being a good loser, about being a good winner, all those different life lessons that goes beyond things I could just teach him in words, but having application to it with the Beagles has been a real blessing.
That's a really great example. I'm glad you shared that. If you do this long enough, you're going to see something weird, unusual, crazy while you're out hunting. What's one of the craziest things you've seen while you've been out on a hunt?
Craziest things I've seen. Well, I'll tell you what. While some of the most memorable things have been from a long time ago, I think the craziest thing I've seen was just this last year. We were at a trial at my club, and the dogs were about 150 yards away. They're running this rabbit. I can hear the rabbit hopping through the brush, so I kind of pull over and get the cast to pull over so we can see down this mowed lane, thinking the rabbit's going to pop right across the mowed lane. We can call a line and score, and the dogs come through. And so I'm sitting there watching, and I can hear that rabbit hopping. He didn't come out on the path yet, and next thing you know, I hear that rabbit squealing top of its lung, and I thought, what dog snuck away from the pack and caught this rabbit? The dogs were 150 yards away. Right. And I ran in there real quick to see what was going on. It's a scoring situation if I can see who caught it, And, I run up on it, and here's this house cat that's not even the same size, smaller than this rabbit. Had jumped on this rabbit, was holding it and kicking it with its back legs, and me running up on it scared that cat enough. It dropped the rabbit, let it go, and the rabbit took off. And so we called a line thinking, well, maybe the dogs will come through and score it. But the dogs they must have been on a different rabbit. They never ended up coming through. But I never seen a house cat jump a rabbit like that. It wasn't a feral cat. It was, from the neighbors just across the street. Somehow it got in there and took down, probably would have killed that rabbit if I wouldn't intervened. So that's probably the craziest thing I've seen. Wow.
I guess UKC's going to have a different kind of title, a new hunting cat champion to go with the hunting beagle champion. Yeah. That's pretty good one. I hadn't heard one of those before. That's pretty crazy. Everybody has a way of getting prepared for a hunt. And I always like to ask people, especially those that are very successful like you've been, is there anything that you do differently when you're getting a hound ready for a big hunt?
Yeah, I don't get to a lot of big hunts anymore, like I said, but just for hunts in general, I don't know if it makes any difference or not, but I'm blessed to be able to, arrange my own work schedule for the most part. And so a lot of times I work mainly in the afternoons and evenings, and so I try to do some running in the mornings when I can. And the week of a hunt, I probably try to run Monday, Tuesday, give Wednesday off, run Thursday, and then give Friday off so they're rested for Saturday. So that's usually what I do if I have the option, run them three days during the week and give them that rest on Friday before their Saturday hunt. But I don't know. I've had hunts when I've gone out to gun hunt with people and run the dogs all day Friday, and they still look fresh the next day on Saturday too. So I don't know if it makes a difference. But I tell you one thing I have been doing for the last 3 years or so is I've been supplementing with that canine red cell. Supplement's been really has toughened up the skin, the tails, and the ears on my dogs. I used to have a bad problem with dogs' tails bleeding so bad,
Right.
Even one situation, losing blood pressure. I had to carry the dog out. Thought I was going to lose it.
Wow.
And that canine red cell toughens up their skin, their ears, like I said, we got a lot of briars and stuff, so those dogs get tore up. And even if they do cut and bleed, it seems like they claw it off sooner. And I really haven't any problems since I've been using that the last few years. And so that's been a big part of what I've been doing too.
So tell us about that a little bit. I'm not familiar with canine red cell. Is it something you spray on? How's that work?
Yeah, it's a liquid supplement, mainly vitamins and minerals. I think it's given some liver flavor, but it didn't look like the dogs appreciate the flavor anyway. But you just put about a teaspoon in with their food,
Okay.
Each day, and that's what I do, and it seems to help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Very good. If you could build the perfect beagle for Jason, what would it look like, and what would it sound like, and how would it hunt?
Yeah, I wish we could do that, right? I wish we could just build a beagle, right?
That'd be
3D
great.
printing maybe someday, AI, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
But for me, what would it look like? I judge the bench in UKC too, and of course, you're looking for confirmation and breed standard in that. But just personally, something that I like is straight legs. That's important to me. I want those straight pasterns. I like the cat-like front feet. If they have those bent pasterns, those bent wrists or feet turned in or out, they're likely to break down over the years and not give you as many good years of good running and just the looks. I like I don't want my beagles look like Bassets, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want those nice straight front and back legs, and so that's one thing to me. And another thing I really appreciate on looks is gait. You may think, hey, what's that all about? But Copper really showed that off to me. I really, when I would put him on the bench, and in fact, there was a lot of times. He doesn't have a lot of just amazing qualities. He doesn't have the typical hound head and muzzle. His ears may be a little short. They come just to the black. They don't go any further to the tip of the nose or anything. But there's a lot of times the judges would come to me and say, yeah, it was a close one, but I gave it to your dog because of the gait. Mm-hmm. And I began to really appreciate a nice gait, and then I began to realize, if you got a dog that isn't bouncing up and down on the top side and just looks like his top side is floating through the brush and just looks like he's effortless, those dogs can go all day long without having to be switched out with another dog. If you have a 10-hour hunt somewhere or whatever with a bunch of buddies, and they got to switch out dogs, their dogs are worn out from exerting too much energy just on the search, and you got a dog with a really good gait, they tend to last a little bit longer before you got to switch them out. And so I really like a good gait on a dog too. And mm-hmm. As far as how they sound, most of my dogs have been chopped mouth. I've never really had a good ball. If I get a good ball, I'd really love to have that. But really, sound to me is not that important. What's most important to me is how they use their mouth. I want a dog that is really honest. I actually prefer a tighter mouth. Some guys, right. See. In fact, what most guys would consider what I like is more on the closer to a fault. Being too tight mouth. And Copper's like that, and that's why I like him. But I'll tell you what, I've had to warn him a couple of times, and I tell the cast, if we're out in the open and in the pasture somewhere, and I'm looking at Copper, and he looks like he has it, and he's taken off, and I tell the cast, I say, look, if he barks here after this, I'm going to warn him for running silent on the track, because sometimes he'll go 10, 15, 20 yards before he wants it hot enough to start barking. But the reason why I really like that too is, one, it keeps you out of the minuses in trials. Right. You don't open up and then can't produce. But secondly, we gun hunt a lot over here in Iowa too. And last thing I want to do is be out in 0-degree weather, have one of my dogs open up, and then say to myself, well, I'll wait to see if so-and-so opens up too before I get serious about getting set up. To me, why do I have that dog if I'm waiting for another dog to see what he does? If I don't trust that dog enough to set up when I hear him bark, why is he there? And I'd rather move on. I'd rather have a dog that's too hot-nosed and would move on and find one that's hot, rather than sitting there freezing, trying to work up a cold track and not going anywhere. So personally, I just like a more tighter mouth dog, mm-hmm. with an honest mouth.
If you could add or remove or modify any competition rule, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question too. With UKC Hunting Beagle, every 2 years when they review the rules, I always put in for the rule to allow track and train collars. Right now, we just allow the train collars, where you can't tone your dog, can't shock your dog, can't communicate with your dog. You can track them so you can see how far away they are, where they're at, that kind of stuff. But here's the reason why I wish that rule would change. Like I said, I ran some ARHA with Elsa, even some AKC before. The biggest complaints I get from some of the guys in the other formats, the complaints they have about the UKC Hunting Beagle, is how few casts we can get out in one day. And, when you think about ARHA Little Pack, they run a 1 hour cast and they don't stop the clock for anything. Handling dogs, no, you don't stop the clock. You keep it running. Well, of course, in UKC, we stop the clock when you handle dogs. But the big issue is, too, when you're handling dogs, each handler gets half an hour to catch his dog before he's scratched. So, if you get somebody that's got a dog that doesn't handle well, every time you catch your dogs after they lose a track or whatever, which is 3, 4, 5 times in a cast, if it's taking you 20 minutes, to catch a dog, I mean, that adds up. You're talking an extra hour, hour and a half of just catching dog time, and that leaves you out in the field longer. You can't get back to the clubhouse and get another cast out. And so that's one thing I've always wanted to change, and I understand the reason why I'm hesitant to make that change. There could be cheating with that and whatnot, but for me, it'd be worth it to make that change.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone you like to beat just a little bit more than everybody else?
Someone I'd like to beat. I tell you what, I'd probably answer that by saying myself, to be honest with you. The way I've always looked at it is I want to compete against myself. I'd make a goal every year, like I said with Copper, I made a goal, hey, I want to try to get him Hall of Fame and do my part, and he'll either do it or he won't. But so I try to set a goal and then make sure I'm doing all the things I need to do to put my dog into position to achieve those goals. And I want to make sure I'm working harder than I was the year before. And that's what really, drives me, competing against myself. And but there are plenty of people that have beat me before, and I was happy to be beat by them, really good dogs.
Everybody has problems. If you need help with a hound-related problem and you could only call one person, who's going to be that person you call?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, this is probably a little unique, but actually wouldn't be a beagler. It'd be my vet, and of course he passed away 2 years ago. Just a young guy my age, but he passed away. But he was my vet and one of my good friends, one of my congregants at the church, and he was like one of the premier vets here in Iowa. He specialized in surgeries for pets, and if I had a problem, I mean, he saved my dog several different times from different instances and different breaches and deliveries where I couldn't get the pup turned, and he'd come in and do an emergency C-section for me and things like that. And boy, I could always count on him if I ever needed anything or needed help or any questions or whatever. I could ask him and he would give me the answers. And so I really miss him on that front, but even more than that, he was a really good friend of mine and one of my congregants. And I'm glad he's with the Lord in heaven, and I'll see him someday there.
That's right. I know you've traveled around different states, different parts of the country. Do you have a favorite club that you like to go to, or a favorite part of the country that you like to hunt in?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, this year I've been traveling a lot less. Pushing for that Hall of Fame. I did more traveling than I expected, and Copper finished about the right time I burned out on the traveling, so that worked out pretty well. But I tell you what, a lot of good clubs, and the best part about that was just meeting new people. And some of those clubs, you go out to Michigan, or and some of those guys know you from Facebook or whatever, but maybe never seen you in person or ran with you. And boy, they just welcome you in, and you're just like best buds. And so just really enjoy getting to some new clubs and meeting new people. Probably one of the interesting situations, first thing that pops into my mind is the Dixon Club in Missouri. They're not hosting clubs anymore, or hunts anymore, but when they had that Eliminator I was telling you about, their last year they hosted the Eliminator. Now the Eliminator West is down in Ava, Missouri, but the last year they hosted it in Dixon. Copper got third there. There's something about that particular place. Any one of my dogs, whoever I bring there, always did really well. I don't know if you ever had a property like that or anything. Like
yeah.
Every time I go there, doesn't matter which dog, my dogs do well. And that was how it was at that Dixon Club. But now that I think about it, actually, even more recently, up at Ryan's Club in Des Moines, one of our sister clubs here in Iowa. We got 3 UKC clubs here in Iowa. And Ryan does a great job running the club, the Mid-Iowa Beaglers, up there north of Des Moines. And we go up there, and I tell you what, the weirdest thing, I just noticed this at the state hunt last year when Copper got a cast win over at a spot that we called the boat ramp. And I started looking back over some of our scorecards, and I think it was, 8 or 10 times that Coppers ran at that particular spot out of all the, 8 or 9 spots they got up at that club. The times he ran over there, he's never lost there.
Wow.
And so when I made that note, he didn't get the run there again the rest of that state hunt after I made that note. So.
I can understand why you like that one.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy thing.
Well, I just have a few more to ask you, but do you have any advice for anyone considering getting into rabbit hunting?
Yeah, just in the rabbit hunting, get with somebody, that is already into it. If you know somebody, one of the things that, like I said, Ryan Elson's been doing up in the Des Moines Club is every year he hosts a hunting beagle seminar. He partners there with the Iowa DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and gets people, there from Des Moines maybe that have never hunted before in the city, and they come out and we do a seminar there where we teach them about rabbit hunting with and without dogs, and then we go out in the field. They get to see the dogs run, and some of those people that have never hunted before, it's really cool. We point out the rabbit as it comes running through, and they're just amazed how those dogs come through right on that track. It just blows their mind, and seeing their faces, is so exciting with that. And then the DNR does some trap shooting out there with the people and stuff. So education is a big piece. Get involved in some seminars like that, or get with somebody that is already into it and just learn everything you can. But as far as the competition goes, for people starting in competition, I kind of learned this the hard way. I was too much into the competition, I think, the first year or two, and would get frustrated and realize, I need to change my perspective. And what I started looking at was going to competitions to learn how to better my kennel rather than to learn how to win. And I'm looking for dogs that, things I don't see in my dogs that I see in other dogs, and things I want to add to my breeding program, and research different lines and who's that dog out of, and I saw that dog do this. And so if somebody's getting new into competition with the Beagles, that would be my best advice there. Don't look at it as my goal is to win. Look at it as, my goal is to better my kennel, and to learn about what kind of dogs I want to run and compete with.
That's great advice. Very, very good advice. As we think about the future, what's the biggest challenge out there for future hunters?
Yeah, we get this, quite a bit. I follow also the, Iowa bow hunters Facebook page, and you see a lot of complaints about hounds and dogs, and I think there's a lot of misconception in the hunting community about dogs messing up deer properties and things like that, and all of us rabbit hunters here, we understand. A lot of us are deer hunters too. We understand deer hunting comes first. It takes priority, and rabbit season runs to the end of February, so we have a month and a half after the last deer season closes to still rabbit hunt. And so we all know that, but at the same time, the more we can help deer hunters understand, that the dogs aren't going to ruin your hunting, and can work together, and not, the more that we have hunters pick on each other and post things on Facebook that's negative, all the PETA people, all the anti-hunters jump on that, and they just expand on it, and it's just bad for the community. And so I think that's one of the big threats we have when we can't come together as hunters and support one another. And probably the other thing is getting youth involved. Obviously, with technology and all this different stuff, it's hard to get youth outdoors like we used to years and years ago. And the more we can get them involved and interested, I think that's important. That's one of the things our 3 Iowa clubs have been working on, trying to get young people involved and new people, and that's really the future of our sport, and encouraging them, and it's really a joy to see. I remember when you get somebody new that's got their first dog, just like I used to have my first dog, and they go to their first trial at maybe my club or something, and they're on a cast with me, and their dog strikes for the first time, and they say, "Strike this dog," and they got the biggest smile on their face. Their dog struck in and all this, and it's just great to see. So getting the young people involved, getting new hunters involved, and is a challenge for us too going forward.
Very well said. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that I should have, or is there anything else you want to cover or promote?
I guess I just say, since this is kind of one of your first podcasts with an Iowa Beagler. Just a little more information about our Iowa clubs and encouraging people, if anybody's listening that's in this area and wants to get involved, we'd love to have you at one of our 3 Iowa clubs. My club is Southeast Iowa Beagle Club. Then we have up by north of Des Moines, Ryan Elson's club, which is Mid-Iowa Beaglers. And then we have over in Columbus Junction, Top of the Hill Beagle Club with Tyler White. And so those are our 3 Iowa clubs in UKC Hunting Beagle right now. And they've been growing, and we're excited about that. And if anybody's listening and is new to beagling in this area, we'd love to have you. We'll walk alongside you, teach you everything you need to know, and just have a good time with you. Also, our state hunt's coming up. We don't want to forget that. Iowa State Hunt's coming up March 1st and 2nd, and that's going to be at Ryan's Club up in Mid-Iowa in Granger, Iowa. That's a good time. We got trophies. We got a embroidered jacket for the winter. Good food. Ryan always does some kind of a great rabbit dish, at the state hunt. So, we were renting the aquarium center there, so we got plenty of room, and it's all heated, and so we're gonna have a good time at the state hunt. So anybody's interested to come to that state hunt in the first weekend of March, we'd love to have you there too.
If people want to learn more about these clubs or get more information about them, do they have websites? Do they have Facebook, social media? What's it look like? How do they find you guys?
Yeah, good question. Facebook is the best way. All 3 of our clubs there can be found on Facebook, and you can just post a question there, and somebody's going to respond, or we'll private message you or whatever. And that's really how a lot of guys get in touch with us. A lot of the new guys, they maybe do some research, and if they're in our area and they stumble across our Facebook page and ask us a question, and then we're off and running, getting them help and getting them started. And so, Facebook would be the best way to connect with us.
And Jason, one other question, in regards to Copper. Now, I know you said you retired him. Is that a hound that people have access to for breeding? Is he up for stud or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sure, he's up for stud, and I posted that on, I think, Facebook's Beagles for Stud page, and so if somebody wants to stud with him, I'm more than welcome. I don't have any of the requirements like maybe some people would. You need to bring a female champion or something like that. Hey, the more pups I get on the ground out of him, I'm happy. And so anybody wants to stud with Copper, happy to do that. Just contact me, let me know, and we'll get that set up. I actually just bred him to my shy female this last week, and so hoping to get a good litter out of them too.
Jason, I'm going to wrap up with this. Now, listen, I know you went for 7 years of Bible school. They had to teach you how to pray there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Would you be willing, because it's a treat to have on a pastor. I don't get many on, but would you be willing to say a blessing over our listeners' hounds for this coming trial season?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, thanks for asking. All right, let me pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the chance to talk here today, Sam and I, and thank you for just this format with the podcast where people can listen and learn more about beagles. And we just thank you for the community that's there and the fellowship that's there. We thank you for the blessing of giving us hounds and something as simple as a dog that we can train and raise and watch and just enjoy the beauty of your creation. Lord, we pray that every time we see our dogs doing what you created them to do, that we would give you praise and thanksgiving for that. And we do pray just a blessing over all of our beaglers that are getting ready for this trial season, and a blessing over their dogs. And most importantly, Lord, we pray that you teach us those character lessons. We teach you that you would use situations in our lives and with our beagles to help us come face to face with our need for you, to recognize that we fall short of your perfect standard, and that you sent your son Jesus to solve the problem of our sin, that we can confess our sins to you, ask for forgiveness, know that you have given us forgiveness and the gift of eternal life. So we thank you for the blessing of your son. We thank you for the blessing of fellowship with beaglers and the blessings of these dogs that you've given to us. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. That was a fantastic prayer. Jason, thank you so much. What a wonderful interview, and I'm so happy that you were willing to come on and share your time with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Sam, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Buff in the Rough, and remember to like and subscribe if you want to be notified when we have new content available. And please send comments and suggestions to buffintherough@gmail.com.